I just want to follow this up because it's not a matter of judgment, it's a matter of the law. And I assume that Dave and Sherry in particular know that under the Municipal Council Conflict of Interest Act, it's illegal for a mayor or a councillor to vote or even seek to influence a matter in which that person stands to gain financially. So I have a question for Mrs. Decter-Hurst. In light of what you just said about you hope your property goes up in value, you support the Strand restoration project, given that admission, why have you made a campaign promise that under provincial law you would be prohibited from voting on or even having any involvement with? How can you keep a promise to have the city fund the Strand restoration without actually breaking the law?
Well, I think, Devon, that not only is it the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law, and what you're trying to prevent is, again, undue benefit from city decisions. I think that as a leader around in the community and at that council table, the mayor is required to be a champion. That doesn't mean that the mayor needs to cast a vote. And certainly, again, in terms of full disclosure, when everyone in the room and everyone in the viewing audience and everyone in the community is comfortable with how the person will benefit on a personal level, then I think that both the letter and the spirit of the law has been met.
I've got the law right here. Number one, you disclose. Number two, you recuse. And number three, you can't influence anybody. That's the law. Simply disclosing it isn't good enough.
To go ahead, Carrie?
You have it, yeah, please.
Yeah, it's yours.
It was directed to you, Sherry. I'm
Thanks.
sorry.
And again, I think that it comes down to the last part about influence and what is influence. If I sidled over and slipped some of my colleagues $50, that might be influence. If I stood on the corner of 10th and Rosser and shouted out in a very loud voice, "Come on down, the rest of the world, this is great. Come and invest your money in downtown Brandon," that's probably stretching the definition of influence to its widest extreme.
I was speaking in the context of your Strand promise. But having said that, you made ethics an issue last week and again just now in respect of Mayor Burgess's conduct on the Fleming issue and his relationship with Mr. Brugger. So in the context of the standard you're holding him to, isn't it fair for us to hold you to the same standard?
Oh, and in fact, I would suggest that you should expect me to exceed that standard.
Do you have a response, Mr. Mayor Burgess?
Well, I guess on a universal basis that you cannot influence or encourage or promote anything that will actually create a financial windfall for yourself. So that you cannot do any of that within the law. So I just couldn't possibly do anything in that fashion that would actually see a financial return to myself. So you can't promote, you can't encourage the other councillors, you can't put it out forward as a project that should go forward. You actually have to remove yourself away, just as I did with the boundary expansion in the southwest corner. As soon as the developer that was involved with that was actually a relative of mine, I had to say right away, I will not have any involvement.
Excellent. Next, John LaReggio from CKLQ.
While we're on the subject of influence, this next question was influenced by a lady in the crowd. She wanted to know about the airport. So my question is, in the past few years, we've spent millions fixing the runways, putting in ILS. The terminal is going to need major upgrades. The chances of Brandon getting air service, and let's be brutally honest, are slim and none. So my question is, will we keep pouring money into the airport, or is that money better spent on infrastructure elsewhere, given the fact the airline industry is not banging on our airport door to land on our runway?
Okay, now it's me.
And I'll ask Dave, Sherry, and the other two candidates.
Good, thanks very much. I guess I have a little bit more optimism than that, John. Definitely back in the year 2000, 2001, we increased the runway by, I believe it was 30%. And that was at the request of WestJet to come to Brandon. And they were promising to do that because they were very satisfied. But then we had 9/11 happen. That threw a wrench into it. We certainly have progressed forward trying to promote it. We still continue. We definitely have interest there, especially with the instrument landing system put in place. That means they can land at any time. The building itself, we want to fix that up only if we attain east-west service. we don't want to build it, and they will come. We've already done that with the runway.
But Dave, you're involved in the negotiations. Is it realistic that Brandon will get air service?
We've actually given many concessions of what we would have are called incentives, even talked about revenue guarantee. Haven't got that passed through council, but definitely talked about it. They didn't even want that. They said it really merits service to Brandon, but we're just not rising right to the top. With the ILS, that helps us go up that ladder quite a bit higher. So we're not giving up. But it is not something that I say spend a whole pile of money and hope they will come. I think you have to have some rationale on that.
Sherry, Dr. Hurst?
Thanks, John. I mean, I'm like everyone else in Brandon. I mourn the loss of PWA and that jet service leaving east-west. That an air service is critical to Brandon's future growth plans. I'm really encouraged to hear how much work our current city council is putting into this file. And again, I'm like Mayor Burgess, hope springs eternal. We got to keep working to make sure that we can get air service back to Brandon.
Mr. Hanson, Mr. Avlanitis, would you like to answer?
Sure. For me, it all comes back to low income and affordable housing. Once we put money into the pockets of consumers, business will benefit. Once business benefits, it'll improve Brandon's tax base. Once we have a larger tax base, we can work with issues like the airport and have it not really affect our taxes going up.
Mr. Avlanitis?
I would think that in the near future, in terms of Brandon, I would think that in the next 5 years, we could be looking at having a steady air service. Our population has definitely increased. We have a lot of new people living here that come from other parts of North and South America, and as well as Europe. And I think that as our population grows, I believe that we will probably attain air service in the next 5 maybe years.
Changing the subject, I'm sure all of you were here during the council debate, and recreation proved to be a contentious issue at times. The sportsplex, the city has seen great success with the spray parks. You know, we've spent a lot of time talking about indoor pools. My question would be, would you as mayor look at evaluating the recreation facilities that we have, that we are going to have, and take a look at the successes that we've had and work on those? We'll start with Sherry Dr. Hurst, Mr. Burgess, Mr. Hanson, and Mr. Avlanitis.
Sure, I think that the rec plan that the city put in place 4 years ago now, I guess, I mean, it's due for a refresh. Brandon's had a tremendous amount of growth in the last 4 years. As well, we've got all kinds of new recreational activities that are being a need for expressed by the citizens in Brandon. So I think that we've got to turn our attentions to, again, keeping that plan current.
Mr. Burgess.
Definitely, I'm very supportive, of course, quality of life enhancement, but you always have to measure what you've invested. For example, this year, $440,000 was invested in the second recreation hub, which is by the Westridge Center. First one was at First and Aberdeen, third in Aberdeen. Tremendously successful, but you always want to gauge that. We were planning for 4 more, but you always want to make sure that it's working. But I also want to add that we wouldn't have taken those steps if we hadn't had the backbone to actually make the decisions to stop having some of the paddle parks that were not being used at all. If you had kept those, you wouldn't have been able to invest that money that we did to expand what we were offering to the public.
Speaking of backbone, one of the issues that has been at the forefront every now and then since I've been here is the recreation center, the golf course. Should the city be in the golf course business? There was an opportunity recently to unload it. The money could be used in other recreational aspects. You can take the money from the rec center sale and pump it into the sportsplex pool if you so desire. We heard from the other council candidates that some were in favor of unloading it, some in favor of keeping it. So as a sidebar question, I'll ask the 4 candidates. Should the city be in the golf course business? Should we be subsidizing golf?
Okay, do you want me to go?
Go ahead,
Sorry
Mr.
to keep you
Burgess.
asking, John. Definitely, that was something that I wanted to explore. I was supportive of selling the golf course. But you also have to take a look at the feedback from the public, also what you attained for offers. The offers that we received were not acceptable. It was just way too low, It was more important for us to try and improve the golf course, and that was what we heard very loud and clear from a lot of people. So there's a lot of passion on some of those that you have to gauge that as a measuring stick, but definitely with the low bids that we received for such an asset, it was not the right thing to do.
Thanks very much. I'm not a golfer and don't have really strong opinions one way or the other whether golf is something that the city should be in. But frankly, it's almost a moot point because, in fact, it's not my personal favorites or personal agenda that you're here to consider tonight. It's, in fact, whether you think we'd have good leadership with me in the mayor's chair.
Well, Sherry, that is part of the leadership.
Yeah,
Tax dollars are going into this
absolutely,
facility and other facilities.
I'll just
So-
finish that, John, that we've got 10 councillors sitting around the table. We've got a report that's going to be coming to them for consideration that's going to have, I'm anticipating, some very big dollars attached to. And again, so based on consultation with the community, information and data from City Hall and the workers, again, we would be involved in making a decision that's going to benefit the community. I do know that if we make the wrong decision and a couple of years from now we need to build a golf course, that's a lot more expensive. And so let's not make recreation decisions hastily without, again, having that long-term view of what the community is going to need.
Mr. Hanson.
Well, I know the sportsplex is a big issue with a lot of people in Brandon, and a lot of people have asked me, Henry, if you become mayor, what are you going to do with the sportsplex? I said, well, I'd like to see the sportsplex and the YMCA both stay open. However, I heard Dave Burgess say that it would be fiscally irresponsible. I can kind of see that, but if selling the golf course can keep the sportsplex and the YMCA both functioning, I'd say sell the golf course.
Mr. Ablanitis?
That's a great topic. Yeah, I got it. It's a good topic. I think the golf course, you know, I'm not a golfer either, Sherry, and I've never golfed. I really haven't, but I've always been able to appreciate the beautiful green grass there. I think that golf course to the city is an element. It's an amenity, and it's one of our greater amenities. And I think that our parks department is the department that has the capacity to manage the greens there, to manage the amount of grass and upkeep that requires, and to appropriately do that. A private enterprise would probably find a difficulty in that, considering our weather here. However, that the buildings and operations that are on that property there, they certainly could be leased out, as they have been recently. You know, they certainly could be leased out and properly supported in the private sector to private business.
Thank you very much.